G'day and welcome to episode 6 of Travel Pointers, the podcast for frequent flyers. I'm Matt Graham, the editor of Australian Frequent Flyer, and I'm joined today by Wilson McTaggart, our other writer at Australian Frequent Flyer. Welcome, Wilson.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me here.
So shortly, Wilson and I are going to talk about the recent changes announced to the Qantas Frequent Flyer program, which has definitely caused a lot of discussion on our forums. And later in this episode, we'll also discuss our experiences flying with Qatar Airways, as well as the epic delivery flights of QantasLink's new Dash 8s. But before we do that, we have a small announcement about the podcast. Firstly, sorry that we didn't release an episode last month. We had a bit of a break over the summer holidays. We're back now for 2025, and from next month, we'll continue releasing a new episode at the start of each month. But the podcast will now have a bit of a different format. From now on, Travel Pointers will be primarily an Australian Frequent Flyer podcast. We'll still share lots of tips on earning and using your frequent flyer points. That's very much something AFF's about. But the podcast will be having more of an AFF angle, so to speak. And for that reason, Chris is stepping down as co-host to make way for Wilson, who's our other content writer at Australian Frequent Flyer and also a gun at finding frequent flyer redemption seats over at the Frequent Flyer Concierge service. Not without saying goodbye, Chris is with me now. Thanks so much for joining me, Chris, for the first episodes of Travel Pointers. It's been great having you on.
Thanks very much, Matt. It was really exciting to produce those episodes with you. And I remember in the office, we were so excited the day that we launched the first episode. And actually, it went to the #1 travel podcast in Australia on its very first day. So thank you all to our listeners for tuning in, for hearing our tales of flights to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, keeping up with the news, and of course for reading Point Hacks and for reading Australian Frequent Flyer. So it's really great to be able to hand over to someone like Wilson. I know how much of a travel expert Wilson is in terms of especially being able to find frequent flyer reward seats. The travel concierge team does some amazing work. And I can actually say my holiday I took over Christmas, New Year, one of the flights that I managed to secure on points was found by the concierge service it was by Josh in our office, but he managed to find me business class to London 2 days after Christmas, which is not an easy ask when I only booked a month or two before travel. So they can do some amazing things. And I'm sure you're going to learn a lot by continuing to tune in to Travel Pointers. And Matt and Wilson as well, I wish you both well and safe travels.
Thanks so much. And I mean, well, if anyone remembers the first episode where we talked about our flights to Abu Dhabi on Etihad, that was also 2 days after Christmas, and we definitely did not find business class availability. We flew in economy.
We did not. It was the only reward seat out of Australia on that date, I think, if I recall. You had booked earlier, and then I was searching. I'm like, yeah, maybe I meet him there if I can find something good. I'm like, okay, Matt, by chance, I can find one reward seat. It is on the flight you've already booked, and it is down the back with you. Let's have fun. And that was a really great flight too.
It was, though. It was. We will still have guests on from time to time, so you never know. Our listeners might get to hear from you again.
There we are.
But yeah, let's get into today's episode. Qantas Frequent Flyer has announced some significant changes that will come into effect to its program over the coming months, and there's some good and also some bad changes. Whether or not the good outweighs the bad is debatable. But first of all, in July, Qantas will increase the number of points that you earn flying on Qantas and Jetstar flights by around 25%, and also remove the current status bonus cap, which means that if you're flying a business or first class, you will earn substantially more points for those flights. On the 5th of August this year, Qantas will increase the cost of most classic flight reward seats, though, as well as classic upgrade rewards, and it will also increase the carrier charges that apply on classic flight rewards on Qantas business and first class flights. And that will also mean that the One World Classic flight reward rates, which you can use, as we talked about in episode 1 of this podcast, to fly around the world, will also go up. Qantas won't actually release the full new redemption tables until May, so we don't really know yet the full extent of these changes, but we do know that pretty much everything is going to go up, and we do have a few examples, other than one very specific type of award, and that's short-haul Jetstar economy flights. So Jetstar flights under 600 miles in distance, so routes like Sydney to Gold Coast or Melbourne to Hobart, will become slightly cheaper. They will go from 6,400 points down to 5,700 points, which makes them the cheapest redemption of any flight in either the Qantas or the Velocity programs. From around October this year, Qantas will also open up new redemption options. It will become possible to redeem Qantas points on Hawaiian Airlines for the first time. Hawaiian, of course, is joining oneworld down the track as it merges with Alaska Airlines. And Qantas will also add premium economy redemptions on Finnair, Iberia, Air France, and KLM. And from 2026, Qantas has announced finally that you will be able to upgrade with Qantas points to business class on Jetstar Boeing 787 flights, which could be interesting. Wilson, what do you think about these changes overall?
Yeah, I think overall it's a negative change. I would say that the reward point increases, they're not too bad. Qantas's prices already are very high. They're some of the highest in the industry. For example, to get to Europe, Qatar Airways on their excellent business class, which we'll talk about later, they only charge 90,000 Avios. Cathay Pacific, they charge 110,000 Asia miles. Qantas already charged 144,600 Qantas points for the one-way business class to Europe. Now that'll be 166,300. The changes to Qantas carrier charges is also quite significant. For example, for Sydney to London for a return trip, you're now going to have to pay $1,775 in extra taxes and carrier charges on top of your points. This is $350 more. The availability increases are great, especially redemptions on Finnair, Iberia, Air France, KLM in premium economy. There's some great products there. It'll be great to fly them. It doesn't really fix the issue of many Qantas frequent flyers in getting out of Australia in premium cabins because Qantas isn't releasing any more seats on its own flights, nor allowing more redemptions on other partners. So I think it's a good change, but I don't see it having a great effect on a lot of people's dissatisfaction with the program.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the changes are designed to do. Like, obviously, Qantas acknowledges that it has a problem with classic flight reward availability. That's why it's made a big deal about the fact that these extra seats on 5 partner airlines are going to add, in Qantas's words, around 1 million extra seats per year, of which I think Qantas believes that it's going to be around 200,000 from the opening up of premium economy redemptions on those 4 international airlines, and also around 800,000 on Hawaiian Airlines. Now, Hawaiian Airlines, of course, does not operate 800,000 seats a year in and out of Australia. So a lot of those seats are probably going to be on like inter-island flights in Hawaii or flights between Hawaii and the mainland US. So how useful they're going to be to Australians collecting their Qantas points is debatable. I do think overall it's not a disaster. It's not the apocalypse. It's not the simpler and fairer changes of 2014, if anyone remembers those. But like particularly, I think some of the changes to carrier charges are quite nasty. Basically, those international business and first class carrier charges are going to be brought up to the same levels that apply to Classic Plus redemptions, which are quite high. I mean, just to give an example, like you talked before about the Sydney to London route, on the Melbourne to Dallas route, the co-payment is currently around $600. That's going to be around $1,300 from the 5th of August, which is a 91% increase. The increase will be similar as well on routes like to New York or Vancouver or to Santiago in South America. And it just reduces the value of the Qantas points that you've already accrued. The good news is that Qantas has given around 6 months of notice, although we won't know exactly what the changes will be until May. So we'll have about 3 months of notice at that point to actually make any bookings before the change comes into effect. And you will still be able to book up until the 4th of August at the current rates for travel up to 11 to 12 months in advance, assuming there's availability. But yeah, the real problem at the moment with the Qantas program has been availability. There's seems to be just a general consensus, certainly on the Australian Frequent Flyer forum and elsewhere, that it's just harder than it was before to find availability, particularly on business and first class flights that people actually want to book out of Australia and into Australia. Once you get out of Australia, it's a bit easier to find redemption seats, as many of us know. But I'm not sure that these changes are going to do all that much, particularly because, Qantas has increased the number of points in the carrier charges you need to book one of their flights using as a classic flight reward, but they haven't actually committed to increasing availability. And just to put it into perspective, between 2019 and 2024, the number of members of the Qantas Frequent Flyer program has increased by 27%, over the same period, the value of Qantas points that Qantas has on its books as a liability has increased by 35%. And Qantas is still releasing roughly the same number of classic reward seats on its own flights. So Qantas's solutions to this seem to be to offer more seats on partner airlines, by increasing the number of partner airlines it has. And but it does, at the end of the day, it doesn't really control the availability that those partner airlines release to Australians. And of course, some partner airlines have basically blocked Qantas frequent flyers from booking seats on their flights, a la Qatar Airways, for example. And Qantas's other solution seems to be to try and roll out Classic Plus and try and really ramp up those Classic Plus redemptions. I'm sure you remember last year Qantas introduced Classic Plus on international flights. Towards the end of last year, it expanded those onto domestic flights. Those Classic Plus redemptions are tied to commercial fares and commercial fare availability. So they are available on more flights, but they basically convert your Qantas points to cash at a rate of about 1 cent per point for economy redemptions. On domestic business class redemptions, it's 1.25 cents per point. And on international business and first or premium economy fares, it's 1.5 cents per point. Now, I don't know about you, Wilson, but I don't really collect my Qantas points in order to cash them out at 1 cent each. Sometimes, when Qantas does put fares on sale, it will highlight the fact that they're good value as a Classic Plus redemption, relative to the Classic reward rate. But if something is good value as Classic Plus, that means that the airfare is low, and I would rather just buy the ticket, earn some status credits for that flight, and save up my points for another redemption because I don't have unlimited Qantas points, so I want to use them wisely. So these changes anyway come hot off the heels of the recent Velocity frequent flyer changes. Qantas literally announced these just a couple of days after Velocity increased the redemption rates on its own flights and its partner airline flights. The increases in redemption costs seem to be roughly the same as what Velocity's increases were, Wilson.
Yeah, that's right. I can't see too many major discrepancies between Velocity and Qantas, especially for business class to Europe, which a lot of Australians are after. Velocity is actually a lot more expensive for economy redemptions to Europe versus Qantas, but the changes are pretty similar.
Yeah, I did find it slightly amusing that, when Velocity made its last round of changes, it decreased the cost of a tier 1 domestic short-haul economy redemption down to 5,900 points in order to be cheaper than a Jetstar redemption on the same route when you're using Qantas points. And now Qantas has basically undercut them, but only for that one specific Jetstar redemption, and then everything else goes up. It seems, I don't know, a bit hollow.
Yeah, it's definitely a marketing spin, but hopefully it results in a little price war or something. They keep going lower and lower just to get that marketing slogan, and you never know, we'll get really, really cheap flights.
Sydney to Gold Coast on Virgin now, if it's Jetstar, if Jetstar comes down to 5,700, is Virgin going to go down to 5,600? Well, I don't know.
Hopefully they make bigger leaps than that.
Yeah. At this point, Qantas has not announced any changes to status, and that was something that a lot of people were anticipating. It is still possible, though, and Qantas has kind of hinted that they might still make more changes to its program later in the year. Do you think we might see Qantas go the same way as Velocity with introducing spend-based status credit earning?
I'd definitely not rule it out. I think that's the way a lot of programs have decided to go, especially in the US. I really do hope that Qantas doesn't. I think that it would take away a lot of the value that a lot of Australians find in Qantas, which is it's quite simple status earning, all things considered. I don't want to have to do some mental maths when buying an airfare of how many status credits I want to earn. And I love this kind of stuff. So
yeah, I was going to say that's saying something because you love mental maths and spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And if you don't even want to do that, then I'm pretty sure that the average Australian flyer also doesn't want to do that.
I doubt it.
Yeah, we've also seen recently, even British Airways announced that they're going to, from April, switch their whole executive club program. In fact, they're completely renaming the program to British Airways Club, and status credits or their tier points are going to be earned based on spend rather than, the distance you fly and the type of fare you book, which is how Qantas works. The backlash from British Airways' frequent flyers, and even some quite loyal, rusted-on frequent flyers who've been, maintaining their status with British Airways for years, has been fierce. There's been a lot of people saying, these changes don't work for me. I'm not going to be loyal to you anymore. I guess it doesn't help as well that British Airways has accompanied the changes with essentially the amount that you're going to have to spend to earn status is now substantially more. The thing that doesn't really make sense here to me is that the whole point of, a frequent flyer program really is to persuade people who are not locked into flying with you anyway, and who are persuadable and who have a choice in which airline they fly. The kinds of people who are going to be spending tens of thousands of pounds a year on British Airways flights and who will be able to still maintain their status are probably corporate flyers who are locked in by their employer to flying with British Airways, or people who are going to fly with British Airways anyway. The kinds of people who are taking a few holidays a year, or they might take like an annual long haul trip, and then for their short haul trips throughout the year they might choose British Airways because they feel that status is achievable and worthwhile, and they can then take advantage, use the lounge and things like that when they travel. Those kinds of people are going to desert the program. And in fact, British Airways is already, this is only announced recently, they've already had to walk back some of these changes, and they're now, sort of reintroducing a sector requirement to earn their bronze and silver tiers. So that's what's going on in the UK. Chris and I talked in a previous episode about the velocity changes and how a lot of AFF members also say that they're probably going to downgrade their velocity status or just switch programs as a result of velocity changes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Qantas.
I definitely won't retain my velocity status because I don't want to spend that much money on flights.
Simple as that. The changes that we've seen as well to the redemption costs and, the general challenge at the moment with redeeming Qantas points for flights to places that people want to fly is also a good reminder of why it's a good idea to diversify your points. And, rather than just collecting points with one frequent flyer program, it's a good idea to spread the risk.
Yeah, 100%. It means that if award costs suddenly change from 100 to 200,000 points or whatever it is, it means you're not caught out. But also it gives you a lot more options for routes that you can fly. You might be able to fly different airlines. Qantas partners with certain airlines, but Velocity partners with great airlines like Singapore Airlines or ANA.
Yeah, and if you're earning points with a credit card, like, you can obviously get a Qantas co-brand card or a Velocity co-brand card or whatever. But if you're collecting instead, for example, American Express membership rewards points, you can transfer those to Velocity, but you can also transfer those to Singapore Airlines KrisFlyer and then take advantage of Singapore Airlines' excellent business class availability out of Australia. Or you can transfer them to Cathay and use Asia Miles to book Cathay Pacific business class with their excellent availability out of Australia to Europe, Asia, North America. You can transfer them to Qatar Airways Avios and take advantage of the much cheaper redemption costs and better availability compared to Qantas anyway on Qatar Airways redemptions to Europe. So it really is a good idea to not put all your eggs in one basket, as these changes show.
I will point out, though, that you do need to still be earning enough points to be able to make the redemptions. If you can't earn enough points across multiple programs to make the redemptions you want, then you're just going to be left with a bunch of points sitting in accounts doing nothing. So you only get value if you use your points. So make sure that you plan your travel a bit ahead and see where you want to go.
To be fair, it is also very easy in Australia to earn Qantas points and to earn Velocity points. So, yes, Qantas might charge more points for a redemption, but if you're able to earn points more quickly, then that's also a consideration, I guess.
Yeah, 100%.
So, Wilson, if someone's listening to this podcast who wants to learn more about how to maximize their frequent flyer points, what can they do?
Well, Matt, they could read the AFF forum. They could also subscribe to the Australian Frequent Flyer Gazette. They could shop to AFF's webinars, or they could even follow AFF on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all great ideas. And definitely, if you're listening to this podcast, you should be doing those things. But there's something else as well that AFF offers, which really explains all the tricks you need to know in a way that's structured, succinct, and easy to follow, and all in one place.
The frequent flyer training.
Bingo! AFF offers 10 comprehensive frequent flyer training courses covering everything you need to know to maximize your points and travel better for less. And they make it really easy to learn all the tricks of the trade. Now, the first 2 courses are completely free for all AFF members, and the other 8 expert courses are available to AFF's Platinum members. You can see the link in the episode notes or go to our website to learn more.
So QantasLink is getting 14 second-hand Dash 8 Q400s from WestJet, which it'll use to ultimately phase out its Dash 8 200s and its Q300 fleet. It's already received the first 2, but really what's interesting about this is how this aircraft got all the way from Canada to their new homes in Australia. So Matt, how did the aircraft actually get to Australia?
Yeah, this is really interesting, Wilson. So the first two have arrived so far. The first one, these planes basically are coming from Canadian airline WestJet. They've been repainted into Qantas Link colours in Ontario, in the east of Canada, and then they've got to fly all the way to Australia. Now, anyone familiar with the Dash 8 probably knows that these aircraft don't have the range ordinarily to fly, a long over water sector like, from the east coast of Canada over to Hawaii, for example. And Russia is obviously out of the question as well at the moment. So the first one flew east and it was a pretty epic 6-day journey with 11 flights in total, 10 stops. And the route is absolutely fascinating because, the Dash 8 can only fly, a few hours at a time. So from the maintenance facility in Ontario, the plane flew to Happy Valley in the far northeast of Canada, then across to Reykjavik in Iceland, then over to Bergen in Norway, Ljubljana in Slovenia, Luxor in Egypt, which was one of the overnight stops. Like, how cool is that? Then over to Muscat in Oman, Chennai, Medan, Makassar in Indonesia, over to Darwin, and then finally to Brisbane. And we posted on the Australian Frequent Flyer Instagram page about this route, and I loved one of the comments that said, the pilots will have been vibrating all the way to Brisbane. I don't know if you've flown much in a Dash 8, but the plane does vibrate a bit. It's a bit, it's a noisy prop plane. So but a very reliable workhorse, of course, for the Qantas Link fleet, and a good aircraft for the regional routes that it flies. But yeah, that was, obviously it's quite expensive flying a plane, 6 days, all that way, around the world to get to Australia. So for the second delivery flight, the plane actually flew west, and to do that, Qantas Link installed extra fuel tanks on board. And so this plane from Ontario flew over to Victoria on the far west of Canada, and then direct from Victoria to Honolulu, which took 8 hours and 23 minutes in the Dash 8, which obviously flies slower than a jet. That's a long flight in a Dash 8. Those pilots definitely would have been vibrating by the end of that one. But after an overnight stop, it then flew to Majuro in the Marshall Islands and finally to Brisbane. Quite an interesting voyage. Did you know that the Australian Frequent Flyer Forum is more than just an online community? We're a community of real people who love to share tips and travel stories, and that includes at in-person meetups. Our members regularly organise dinners and other events, which you can find listed in the Meetings and Social Events forum on AFF. It's a great way to network with other frequent flyers. But the highlight each year is the annual gathering, isn't it, Wilson?
Yeah, 100% right, Matt. I've been to the last couple. I really love the sense of community at these events. We're all there because we love our travel. It doesn't matter where we've come from, how old we are. It's all great. So, Matt, when and where is the next one?
I'm glad you asked. It's 21 to 23 November this year, 2025, and it will be in Melbourne. So I'll be there, you'll be there, Wilson. A lot of the AFF team will be there, and a lot of AFF community members as well. So it'll be great to see you there. You can express your interest on the thread, which we'll link in the episode notes. In this episode, we wanted to try a new segment where we talk in a bit of detail about an airline and our experiences with it. And we thought we'd start with Qatar Airways. Now, Qatar Airways is obviously the national airline of the state of Qatar. It's based in Doha, and it was founded in 1993 with its first flight to Amman in 1994. Now, the Qatari government, which owns the airline, was originally a joint owner actually in Gulf Air, which is now the national airline of Bahrain, along with Oman Air. But it sort of broke away and started off Qatar Airways as its own airline in the 1990s. And as they say, the rest is history. The airline has expanded rapidly since then. It's now a major international airline, one of the big three Middle Eastern airlines. It flies to Australia, as we all know. And its geographical location based in the Middle East really gives it, a lot of opportunities to connect the world. It's a really great location. You can connect through Doha to get to just about anywhere. And a lot of the world's population also live within a short flight of Qatar. Now, Qatar Airways first started flying to Australia in 2009. Its first route was from Doha to Melbourne. And then it's basically been trying ever since to increase its services into Australia. It's obviously a profitable market for the airline, and the airline would love to fly more. But it's been, obviously, for those who've been following, that's been met with a few hurdles. The air services agreement between Australia and Qatar limits the number of flights that Qatari Airlines can operate into the major Australian ports. And Qatar's been trying for years to increase the rights that it gets. But at this point, it only has rights to fly basically one daily flight into Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and Brisbane. It has also a daily flight to Adelaide. And in the air services agreement, it can add one extra daily flight into a secondary Australian city via one of the major cities. That's why Qatar has that weird flight from Doha to Adelaide via Melbourne, which has an overnight stop in Melbourne, which is not an attractive schedule at all for anyone who actually wants to get to Adelaide. But that flight basically exists just so that the airline can get an extra daily frequency into Melbourne, and then the 15 to 20 passengers who want to go on to Adelaide can do that as well. To get around this, Qatar it's now really going all in on its partnership with Virgin Australia, which is interesting because Qatar Airways is part of the One World Alliance, and it's a partner through that alliance of Qantas. And it was a revelation recently that a few years ago, Qatar actually tried to get Qantas kicked out of the One World Alliance because the Qatar felt that Qantas was blocking its attempts to expand in Australia, and they really haven't got along. And there's been a bit of tit for tat as well with the frequent flyer programs of Qatar Airways and Qantas. Like Qatar has blocked Qantas frequent flyers from accessing a lot of Qatar Airways redemption seats. And Qantas Frequent Flyer, a little while ago, actually changed its program to make it harder for Qatar Airways Privilege Club members to earn Q points on some Qantas domestic flights, and it's quite a weird thing going on there. But yeah, as I said, Qatar's now gone all in on its partnership with Virgin Australia. It's proposing to buy a 25% stake in Virgin Australia, and Virgin Australia is now going to be marketing flights which are going to be operated by Qatar Airways, but they'll be flying from Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and Brisbane to Doha by the end of this year on VA flight numbers, so to get around those loopholes. So yeah, the history between Australia and Qatar Airways is interesting, but Qatar Airways has been routinely voted as one of the world's best airlines. The business class Q Suite product is probably one of the best business class products in the world. It's a very popular one. A lot of frequent flyers love to fly in that product. And I think we mentioned this before, but Qatar Airways' Privilege Club program is a partner in Australia of American Express membership rewards, as well as City rewards if you have the Prestige card. So you can transfer points earned on some Australian credit cards into their Privilege Club program. Wilson, Qatar has 3 cabin classes: economy, business, and first, and they have quite a lot of different configurations on those aircraft.
Yeah, that's right. It only has first class on one of its main aircraft, which is the A380, which it does at the moment fly from Sydney and Perth to Doha, so you can get first class from Australia.
Good award availability too.
Yeah, it's actually better than business class in some cases, which is pretty funny.
And you can book that with Velocity points even.
Yes, which is very good. You can use Velocity points for Qatar Airways, economy, business, and first class, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and you can use Qantas points as well if you book within 3 days of departure.
Yes, so technically speaking, you can use Qantas points. Realistically, no chance. I have seen occasions where economy, because economy is actually 30 days prior to departure, you can find Qatar Airways economy on Qantas points, but that's about the limit of what you can get. Its economy product is actually quite good as well, flying the long distances that Qatar Airways often does, but its business class is where it really shines, at least with its Q Suite product. Unfortunately, for some frequent flyers, Qatar does have a lot of different business class products. I'm a little bit of a product nerd, so I like to research this in a lot of detail, but frequent flyers often talk about getting Qatar'd.
Is that the same thing as getting Turkished by Turkish Airlines when they change the aircraft type? Yeah,
exactly. So Qatar Airways often change the aircraft type, and with that, they'll change the product that you get on board. So if you're booked in business class at the time of booking, you might have been booking a Q Suite equipped aircraft, but Qatar Airways may have changed that in the meantime, and you could be stuck with a seat neighbor and no direct aisle access.
Do they let you change to another Q Suite flight though if they do that?
Luckily, they are actually quite generous. They do let you change to a Q Suite equipped aircraft on the same route. But if they change the aircraft type completely on the route, so they're not scheduling any Q Suites on that route, it's tough luck.
Mm. I have been Qatar once. I had booked from Doha to Delhi on an A350, which was I think a 121 configuration in business. I booked this using Qantas points back when you didn't have the restriction of booking up, 3 days out. But yeah, the day of the flight, they changed it to a Boeing 777-200LR. It was 222 with a much older business class product, but whatever. It was a 3-hour flight. It was still great service. But yeah, not much you can really do if it's the day of and you need to get somewhere. But the economy product as well is pretty good. Have you flown their economy on Qatar Airways?
Yeah, I've only flown the A330s back when they flew them, and then the A380 from Doha all the way to Sydney. It's a good product. It's pretty standard in terms of configuration, but good food on board and great entertainment.
Yeah, I've flown Qatar economy a few times as well, like from Tbilisi to Doha, Doha to Colombo. The service has been great. Like the food is good. Yeah, as you say, the entertainment. I'm not sure about the economy seats on their Boeing 777-300ERs, which they fly to Australia on most of those routes. They're a bit tight, but I mean, I guess basically industry standard. But yeah, very good service. Now, in this episode, we wanted to go into a little bit of detail about a couple of trips that we've each taken on Qatar Airways. And Wilson, why don't you start? You recently booked a trip in Qatar business class out of Manila, flying Manila to Europe and back. You obviously live in Australia. Why did you why did you start in Manila?
Yeah, I started in Manila mainly to take advantage of the cheap airfares out of Asia. So that's a nice little trick you can do to lower the cost of business class to Europe. A lot of Australians want to travel to Europe, and because of that, airlines tend to charge a lot more than almost the same distance of flight, but from Asia.
Let's just expand on that for a moment for those who aren't familiar with that strategy. So, what's the idea that you book like a return flight from Australia to somewhere in Asia, and then you book on a separate ticket from Asia to Europe, and it works out to be overall a lot cheaper?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Another point to that is that you can often find award availability, especially on Qantas, to destinations in Asia, such as Manila, or Jakarta is another good one. And then from there, you can buy your business class ticket. So it allows you to use your points as well as getting you cheaper business class. And in this case as well, because Qatar and Qantas, despite really not liking each other, they are still part of One World, and you can get Qantas status credits flying on Qatar Airways.
So you booked this business class ticket from Manila to Rome and back. How are the flights?
Honestly, the flights are probably some of the best, if not the best I've had. I was lucky. I didn't get Qatar'd on my Manila to Doha legs, and so I booked and got Q suites on both legs. And Q suites were introduced in 2017, but even now it holds up as one of the best business class products in the world. From Doha to Rome, they fly an A350, which has a slightly different product. It's a bit more open. It doesn't have a door, but it's still a very, very comfortable product. The best experience I had actually was on Doha to Manila, that last flight back. The lounge in Doha is fantastic, proper a la carte meals, and the service on board was also really, really good. Flight attendants were very attentive. You can actually dine on demand where you request when you want to eat. So the level of service is just a bit above what you'd probably normally expect on business class. Yeah, I've also written a review of this flight. You can check it out on AFF if you want to have a read or see the episode notes.
Yeah, I would agree about the service in Qatar business class. I found that they're really good at anticipating what you want before you know what you want. Like I remember one flight in particular where the cabin manager would come through before I even knew that I wanted a drink, and he would sort of say like, "What can I get you to drink?" Not, do you want anything to drink? But he was really like, "I want to get you something. What can I get you? What would make you feel good in this moment?" And it's like that kind of service that you just don't get on that many other airlines, other than maybe Air Astana.
I know you have a great love for Air Astana, but personally, I'm going to have to put Qatar Airways above Air Astana at this time.
Okay. Yeah, I've also very recently flown with Qatar Airways on, it was actually a redemption booking that I made using Alaska Airlines mileage plan miles of all things. Alaska Airlines is a One World partner of Qatar Airways, of course, so you can use Alaska Miles or any other One World program really to book a reward seat on Qatar Airways. And I just did this trip last month. I was traveling in the Middle East and I booked from Dubai to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia via Doha with an overnight stop in Doha. And I booked this in first class. Now, it's not really first class on Qatar. I don't think we mentioned this before. On Qatar's flights within the Middle East, they have two cabins, economy and first. But the first class is basically just marketing. It's the same actual seat as business class on the long haul routes. And in my case, both flights were on an A350 1000 with Q suites, which was
Wow.
a really lovely way to fly, although a bit unnecessary on two flights that were basically 1 hour each. But yeah, this trip would have cost about $2,000 to book as a one-way ticket in first class, which I did not pay. And so I had a look at using some, obviously, points or miles to book this. They're two relatively short flights. So I could have booked it using Velocity Frequent Flyer. It would have been 26,000 Velocity points, but the taxes and carrier charges would have been well over $700. Australian dollars. And that's because of the carrier charges that Velocity adds on to Qatar Airways flights on a per segment basis. So with two segments, even though they're short segments, those for first class, those carrier charges were really high. Qantas, because I was booking more than 3 days out, was not an option using Qantas points. So instead, I turned to Alaska Airlines mileage plan, and Alaska Airlines only charged 15,000 miles, and it was $89 US, which is 142 Australian dollars. I actually just bought the 15,000 Alaska miles that I needed. There was a sale on. I think they got some bonus miles included in that, or a discount or something. And the cost of the miles was less than I would have paid just in Velocity's carrier charges. So I thought that was a really good use of Alaska Airlines miles. And Alaska is a very interesting program. You can, by the way, if you have American Express membership rewards points, you can actually transfer those Amex points into Hawaiian miles. And then at a one-to-one basis, you can then transfer them from Hawaiian miles into Alaska Airlines mileage plan. And Alaska Airlines is a really interesting program. It has some niche partners, like it has partners with Icelandair, with Condor, the German airline, partners with Korean Air, even Qantas as well. You can book Qantas flights. And when you redeem Alaska miles, with a couple of exceptions, there's no carrier charges or fuel surcharges. So you just pay, I think it's a $12.50 US partner booking fee to book on a partner airline, and that is instead of all of the carrier charges. So yeah, very, very interesting program. And it was a great trip, I have to say. Like, I did this trip over 2 days because I had an overnight stop in Doha in the middle, and it was 2 evening flights. So the first leg from Dubai to Doha was very pleasant. I got to use the Ahlan first class lounge. I hope I've pronounced that right, in Dubai. And actually, for Qatar Airways first class ticketed passengers, they actually had like a separate section at the back of the lounge, which is roped off just for Qatar Airways, with like a la carte dining, with champagne, with cocktails, and really good, really prompt table service. So that was quite a nice lounge experience for a third party lounge. And the flight as well was great. When you get on board, they'll bring you anything you want to drink, like literally anything on the menu. It's not just, oh, would you like still or sparkling water? It's, can I get you some champagne? Or do you want rosé or brut champagne? And or do you want the lemon mint drink? The lemon mint drink, by the way.
Oh, that lemon mint drink. That lemon mint drink is honestly one of my favorite beverages ever. I think it's up there with Bundaberg ginger beer and Qantas's house lemonade. It's fantastic.
Yeah, as a non-alcoholic beverage on an airline, that's probably up there with Cathay Delight, I would say, the signature Cathay Pacific drink. But yes, very, very good flight. It was the flight time was only an hour, so they just served like a little tray of snacks basically, and another drink once we got in the air. Got to Doha, and I was stopping overnight, so I cleared immigration. Having a first class ticket, they let you use the premium immigration lounge, I guess it is, where you go in as like a separate area for their business and first class passengers. You can get there's like a lounge area, you can get a cup of coffee, and then you go through like an immigration checkpoint that has no line. So that was nice. And I was even able to use the Discover Qatar like stopover package to book a hotel it was less than $100 for the hotel, because it's basically a discounted rate for people who are stopping over in Qatar. And I booked the Hyatt Regency Oryx Airport Hotel, which was very nice. Yeah, so the next day we went back to the airport, and because my next flight was also in first class, I was very, very lucky to get to use the Al Safa Lounge, which is the top Qatar Airways lounge in Doha. Even like platinum status with Qantas or like One World Emerald will not get you into that lounge. You have to have a first class ticket. But of course, because the flights within the Middle East in the premium cabin are marketed as first, you get into this, I don't know if opulent is the right word to describe the lounge, but it's massive. Like, I'm struggling, Wilson, to think of a better lounge probably anywhere for an airline.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can you think of any?
I mean, the photos that you sent me, it looked like a museum, and it looked like a fantastic museum. In terms of a lounge, I've never seen anything quite like it. I've heard fantastic things about the La Première lounge in Paris. or the first class terminal in Frankfurt. But I don't think it's definitely doesn't seem like the same sort of experience as walking into a grand marble hallway in an airport.
Yeah, and like they had items on loan from, I believe, the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. Like they had literally a section that was just a museum exhibit. I mean, they also had a duty-free shop in there, but also like like a business center. And when like they have like workstations, but it's not just like a desk with a computer. You get like a whole office basically, which you can just use. And then there's 2 separate dining areas. There's a spa. There's a jacuzzi. I was slightly disappointed I ran out of time to use the jacuzzi because I was too busy enjoying the dining, which was excellent, I have to say.
A good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have. That is probably the epitome of first world problems. No, it was a great experience. The staff were lovely. I really enjoyed that. And then the next flight onwards to Riyadh was pretty much the same as the first one, except no alcohol at all on the menu. Just non-alcoholic drinks. I did get to try they called it a luxurious non-alcoholic bubbly, it's the Sojeni drink, which looks like champagne. To be honest, it tastes like grape juice. I didn't really think it tasted like champagne, but it was pleasant. And yeah, got into Riyadh. So a great airline. They do fly on all of their routes into Australia, except on the A380s. They do fly Q suites, and those flights they're going to be operating on behalf of Virgin as well. Will be all 777-300ERs with Q suites. And there is, at the moment, pretty good award availability on those flights, on the Virgin flights, and also Qatar's own like operator marketed flights from Australia to the Middle East and Europe. So a good way to travel.
Oh, it's a fantastic way to travel. The level of service is outstanding and the product's outstanding. One thing that we didn't mention about the Q Suite product is, and it's pretty unique, is that you can make it into a sort of double bed if you're traveling with a partner. Or even if you somehow have 4 people traveling as a group, you can book out what they call the quad. So you can have 4 people eating, drinking, laughing, all in their sort of enclosed space.
I did actually see that on one of my flights. There was a family of 4 from Brazil who was traveling in, like they had booked out there's kind of like 2 seats across from 2 other seats sort of facing each other, and you can like lower the divider and, as you say, use it as a space for your whole family. It looked great. They were having a ball. What an interesting product.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I guess to make that work, we didn't mention that half of the seats are facing backwards.
Yes, that's right. It can be fun on takeoff and landing. If you are facing backwards, you'll see things go, I guess, the wrong way. But it's a small price to pay.
Well, that's all for this episode of Travel Pointers. We hope you enjoyed it, and we can't wait to share more tips with you next month. For more information about the topics discussed in this episode, you can see the links in the show notes. And we'd be interested to know what you think about the new format. You can leave a comment, as always, on the Travel Pointers discussion thread on the Australian Frequent Flyer forum. We hope to see you next month, and in the meantime, happy flying.
Bye for now.